All right. So we are so excited to be here again for Real Life Connections. We have our conversations going, and I'm so excited to interview our next guest. So our guest today is Andy. He is currently in Washington, D.C., originally from California, and he is a disability advocate and an expert in inclusion and awareness and fighting for disability rights. So Andy, we are so excited to have you here today on Real Life Connections. Um, how are you doing?
I'm good. I've been
Good.
able to leave the house at least twice in the last 4 months. So I'm super excited about that.
There you go. That's awesome. Well, Andy, we would love to learn a little bit about you. Can you tell me about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Andy, and right now I currently work in DC on policy, in DC on policy for people with disabilities. But I've done so much in my short little life. I grew up in foster care, so I grew up in systemic poverty, and I really wanted to be an advocate for people in marginalized communities such as LGBTQ and Hispanic, which I am, and of course people with disabilities. I have CP. I wear that proudly because I think we should be proud of our disabilities. I've worked on disability rights through independent living centers, which I don't know who knows what those are, but so just so everyone knows, an independent living center is a place where people with disabilities can go and get advocacy resources and learn how to be more independent. So I did that for several years, and then that got me itching to work on policy. So I've been here in DC for 4 years. I've worked at a law firm, and I've also been in the entertainment industry for a long time, trying to make my way through media, because I think media, like what you're doing here, is one of the biggest ways to create influence and to create the perception of change that I think needs to shift within our community.
Very cool. That's awesome. So you said you're into policies and kind of, advocating for change. What sparked that interest or what got you started in that?
I didn't see, I knew about Judy Humans and I knew about Ed Roberts, right? They are like the old school, um, very well known disability rights people, and just in dark. But I didn't see people in the Hispanic role in that way, right? And I still don't see it. 30 years later, I still don't see Hispanic leadership in the disability community. So I'm still here trying to make that happen because I think disability is the one thing that touches all of our lives, no matter if you were born with it, or you're going to get old and have a disability, or you're going to get hit by a bus, or a squirrel's going to attack you and you're going to have a disability. Who knows? But it's going to hit everyone at one point or another. And I think it needs to be as diverse as possible. And I love my white friends, but it's very white driven. It's a very white space when it comes to disability policy. And I think that needs to change. So
Gotcha.
that's
Okay.
why I do it. Yeah.
Very cool. So let's shift a little bit and talk about your disability. What it's like living with a disability.
So it's challenging, right? I have CP. I've been on my own since I was 17. And I think people with disabilities are inherently um, like ingenuity. They have some ingenuity in the way they think and the way they have to function.
Mm-hmm.
I know the way you use a pointer in your mouth. I saw that and I thought it was really cool, but then I see the great painting behind you and I'm like, oh my goodness, okay, you have more skills than I do with a paintbrush. So growing up with a disability and having a disability in a daily basis is difficult because I never know how my body is going to be.
Okay.
I can't plan out when I may have a spasm, when I may not have a spasm, and this may happen to you. My brain and my head and everything above the neck wakes up way earlier than the rest of my body. But if I try to like skip out of bed, which has never happened, by the way, I would fall flat on my face because my legs are like, no, we're staying in bed for another 30 minutes. I don't know what you think you're doing, but so it's just really hard to function sometimes. And I honestly, I don't think about my disability on a daily basis because I think I would be a little Sally Sad Pants if I constantly thought that my disability was going to be the challenge to my day, right? There's so many other things going on in this world. I try to focus on those things rather than my physical disability.
Perfect. So you mentioned you have CP, and so for some of our viewers who may not be familiar, that's cerebral palsy, right?
Yeah.
And what's your definition of cerebral palsy?
So my definition of cerebral palsy, I don't know the medical terms. I'm really
That's why
bad.
I asked you.
Yeah. I'm very bad at like what kind. I know my doctor knows because he said it, but if you ask me to repeat it, I'm like, say what? I know my CP affects my lower extremities the most. I have spasms in my legs, and my center of gravity is way off. Also, my body temperature is like nil. I don't know whether I'm super hot until I'm like boiling, and I don't know that I'm cold until I'm almost frozen. So it's really interesting for me to be on the East Coast where it's super cold and super hot in the summer because my body doesn't know what to do with itself. It's like, what are you doing to me? Um, so that's mainly how my CP affects me. I also have like my arms and stuff are good, but like if I have a cocktail, which I'm old enough to drink, obviously, so I do enjoy the spirits. But if I have one of those, then my CP either gets better or it gets worse, depending on the ratio. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, perfect. So let's kind of go back a little bit in time and let's talk a little bit about growing up with a disability. What did that look like for you? Did you experience bullying? Kind of run through that a little bit with us.
So I hated it, to be honest. I did not have disability pride until my late teens, early 20s. I I school was hard. Not the learning aspect, but the fitting in. Um, and this is even before I came out as LGBTQ. Just dealing with my disability um, and asking for accommodations and feeling super isolated because I needed to be taken out of class to take tests, or I needed extra time, or I had an aide, or all those extra things that now I don't care. I'm like, give me whatever I need to make my life easier and function. Sure, but when you're like a teenager and you're trying to fit in and you're trying to be a cool kid, no, it was not. I did not enjoy myself. I did not embrace myself as a whole human being. I tried to push my disability away, and so I think it led to some very bad internal ableism. And I didn't have any disabled friends when I was growing up because I was like, whoa, I'm not dealing with this.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I moved to LA and I met my friend Angela Rockwood, who was a push girl on the reality TV show Push Girls, and we started acting together, that I was like, wow, disabled people can be interesting, sexy, and different. And then I started to see my uniqueness in that space. And then I started to like fully embrace my disability. And now my disability is what opens doors and not shut those doors for me. Because when I was a kid, I didn't want anyone to think of me any different because of my wheelchair or my walker or the fact that my legs look different than they did. And so that still, I'm okay with it now, but I think it still lingers with some of the body issues that a lot of adults with disabilities have. Right. So yeah, it was rough growing up with a disability. It wasn't flowery or joyful or sweet. Like there was no like yay, I have a disability and I have best friends. No, it wasn't anything like that. Um, yeah.
Gotcha. So was there moments of bullying by other kids, or do you think it was like internal for you? What does
I
it look
think, yes, there was bullying, but I think I didn't make it any better. I'm not blaming my bullies
Sure.
or blaming me on their, how do I say this? So, yes, I did get bullied, but I think I exacerbated the bullying a little bit because I fell into it, right? I really, I figured, okay, this is gonna sound really bad. I'm gonna get like super high level on your viewers. Sorry. So they bullied me, and instead of walking away or instead of addressing it in a positive way and being empowered, I would rather have their negative attention than be ignored, right? So I would allow them to bully me, and instead of rolling or walking away, I continually put myself in those environments. And honestly, my best friends were some of my bullies. And at the
Mhm.
time when they were my best friends, I didn't know they were my bullies
Right.
because I would get to hang out with them, and oh my gosh, how lucky was I? But they were essentially using me as a verbal punching bag and as a joke, and I didn't realize that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that. That's a different side that, we haven't talked about yet. There are conversations that we've had, but I think it's really important to show that so that people understand. So far, obviously you've done so many things, and you're not even close to 50 yet. I mean, my goodness, you have a
Oh
long
my
way
God,
to go.
now I'm way beyond, like, I'm so not even thinking about 50 at
Right.
all.
So all
Yeah,
these awesome things that you've accomplished, what's one of the biggest challenges you think you've faced so far?
I think growing up in foster care was a big, like, I have to be honest, not having full on family support for the majority of my life and moving out at 17 was really hard. I think that parents can be annoying and can be frustrating and can be like overbearing when it comes to youth with disabilities. But I think if I would have had a little bit more structure and guidance
Hmm.
and not so much like do whatever you need to do to move forward,
Right.
um, I would have been further along. Although I will say on the flip side of that, not having those supports throughout my life and having them sporadically, because I did have them sporadically. I had some good foster parents growing up, and I had some people that considered me family, but I had that very small doses.
Hmm.
Um, but that was really the catalyst for me to become so independent. Like if I had had the full on structure, I definitely wouldn't be as outspoken. I
Right.
think I would be, because I used to be shy, surprisingly. Before I became what my friends call a unicorn that shoots glitter everywhere, I used to be really shy because I didn't think that I deserved attention or I deserved any kind of acknowledgement for who I was.
Hmm.
So it was a double-edged sword. I always wanted family, but then on the other hand, I was thankful that I was able to fly so free and challenge myself on my own.
Yeah, for sure. And you bring up a good point. So it's funny. You talk about how you were shy, and now nobody would even know that that was a side of you, right? If they met you today,
No,
nobody would know that's a side of me either. I used to be the quietest person. I used to be afraid of everything. I never wanted to talk to anybody, but nobody
totally.
would know that today.
Yeah, I would not suspect that of you at all. So,
No, nobody would, but I think it's the more opportunities we have to, and it sounds funny saying it, but the more chances we have to struggle and figure out how to fight for ourselves, the more outgoing we become. Because unless you're put in that situation, you can stay quiet and it's totally fine because other people are there and doing everything you need. So it's at those moments when you have to do it on your own. You're like, maybe I should ask somebody to open that door because the longer I stare at it, it's still going to stay
not
closed.
going to magically open for me.
Exactly.
That door is like a metaphor for life, right? We have to
Absolutely.
challenge ourselves. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, that was awesome. So let's see, what's your most on a daily basis, like what's the most frustrating thing that you deal with having to live with a disability? What's just one thing?
I guess people's perception, because I'm getting high level with your folks. I'm sorry, but I read energy. Like I can read people's kind of energy towards me and towards like I can read a room very well, and I know that when I roll into a room, I'm a lot to handle. Right? I'm gay. I'm Hispanic. I'm in a wheelchair. People are like, whoa, what am I going to do with this guy? Right? Especially in my professional world, they just don't, it takes a lot for people to handle. So I have to kind of deflect people's perception of what they think I'm capable of or not capable of. And that's been a challenge since I was 5 to now. And I think that it happens to a lot of people with disabilities on a daily basis. But because I have all these not multiple identities, but different facets to myself, like LGBTQ and Hispanic, I have to deal with those identities as well as the disability.
Sure, yeah. And you bring up a point that we've talked about quite a number of times in each interview is changing perceptions. But I've had some people say they think it's our job to change the perception, and some people say people, coming into the disability community, it's their jobs to change their perception. So what do you think? What changes that perception so that it's not so black and white anymore?
So I think it's a two-way street, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think we have to carry ourselves as badass, people, whether or not we have a disability. We have to own ourselves. We can't expect people to accept us. Like that's not our job. Is to go roll into a room and be like, please give me a seat at the table. You know what I say to people? I have the seat. You're just hearing me now. But I've been here the whole time. Your ears are just too good. But hello. So it's more of like just showing up and being present and being real. As far as other folks, I think the only way we're going to shift those perceptions, and I hate to be super shallow about this, is by media. Media is the catalyst that affects so many people, and we emulate the media. We do, even subconsciously. We think about the Kardashians. We think about all this stuff that's constantly thrown at us, and that's who we want to be like, right? We think, oh no, I'm not influenced by the media, but that is the one thing that influences all. So I think when we have somebody with a disability from a marginalized community, working, having a life, having a love life, and having a full life, then people's perception is going to shift and be like, wow, they're normal too. And
Right.
the only other thing I'd like to say about that is when people start looking at disability as part of our lifespan, like part of who we are as people, instead of that horrible thing that happened to you or that horrible thing that happened to me.
Yep.
It's going to happen to you. Accept it now, and then you and I aren't going to look so different to them, right?
Sure.
Because it's part of what's going to happen to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you brought up a good point, and it kind of leads to my next question. So I wanted to ask you about role models, but before we go down that road, you talked about media. And I know when I was growing up as a little girl, there was nobody in the media that I looked like. And I was like, okay, so my friends want to be like Britney Spears and Beyonce and all that. And I'm like, I don't be like anybody because I don't look like anybody. Like, who am I supposed to grow up to be like? Like, none of them look like me. And so that was something that was very hard to face. And eventually I realized in a role model, I was looking at personalities and traits that I wanted to follow instead of look, because there still aren't that many people out there, that look like us. So who is that role model for you, or how does that go for you for finding role models like that for you?
Actually, it's funny. My biggest role model came from books,
Okay.
not from TV. I was a huge reader when I was younger, and until I hit college, because I had to read so much for school. I was like, oh, I don't enjoy reading anymore. But my biggest role model, to be real, is Anne Frank. And
Okay.
I know she was a real person, and she had so much adversity happen in her life. But what made her a role model for me is that she was pushed to her breaking point, and
Mhm.
she was still able to accept the goodness of others. And that's something I try to live in my life every day. Like, and people may look a certain way or feel a certain way about some things, but I try to accept the best, most positive aspects of everyone I encounter.
Sure, that was a really good example. And sometimes you don't think about books and, other types of print media and things like that because all the digital media is so in our faces all day long. But that was
Yeah.
that was really neat. I love that example.
I
Um,
can't see anybody like me on TV yet, so I can't be like, oh, this person, right?
yeah, right. I know. I'm waiting. We'll just go on TV so that people can be like, I want to be like them, and we'll just be the
Yes,
ones on
I
TV.
want to be like Andy, exactly.
Yeah, there is my role model. Perfect. Okay.
I'm gonna get to role model myself. Yay!
It's all good. So let's kind of switch gears. So you're a very motivated person, obviously, and you don't really let anything stop you. But was there ever a situation where you were told you can't, and then you said, I don't think so, and then you proved them completely wrong?
So ever since I was a little kid, ever since I was like, I'd say like 6 or 7, you tell me I can't do something, that's the first thing I'm gonna do. So many people told me, Andy, you're never gonna live on your own. You're never gonna drive. And then when I came out, my gay friends were like, what do you have to offer in a relationship? You're never going to be able to be in a meaningful relationship. You're never going to be able to graduate from college. All those things. So every time somebody said never, I'd be like, this way, give me a moment, give me a minute. And it's the only thing now that is in the way of that is like my TV and acting career, right? So people are still telling me like, we're not ready for someone like Andy. Like, we're ready for a disabled gay character, maybe, as long as he's white. We're ready for a Latino character, but they can't be in a wheelchair. Or you know what I mean? So I'm still there. The entertainment industry is still giving me a no, and I'm just like, wait a minute, give me a second, I'll get there. You're gonna be like, wow, we needed you 10 years ago, but surprise, you're here now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important. In my very, very first interview we've done on Real Life Connections, my guest said, it's never I can't, it's just I can't yet because it's coming. And yet is a
Oh,
powerful, very powerful word. And so ever since he said that, it's stuck with me. But it's so true. We may not be able to do it today, but we'll figure it out for sure, right?
but we
So
definitely will. We'll figure it out faster than most people because we have to figure everything out every single day, every minute of every day.
that's right. Yeah, absolutely. So living day to day for you, what types of do you use any types of certain assistive technology? I know you mentioned a walker and a wheelchair. What kind of technology or assistive devices do you use to get around?
I use a wheelchair, a manual wheelchair, and I have a smart drive on that wheelchair that I use for the most part. Um, But I do use a manual wheelchair because I'm afraid of being in a power chair. I have a little bit of fear of being in a power chair because of the loss of mobility. Like, I don't want to lose that independence.
Sure.
And so when I drive, I use a hand control, right, to drive my car. I also use Dragon because my fingers have some dexterity, but they're not as fast as I would like them. So I'll never play classic piano. Um, but yeah, so I use Dragon naturally speaking. I use a wheelchair and a smart drive. I use a lot of things in my day to day.
That's awesome. And do you have a regular car or do you drive a minivan? What? kind of car do you have?
Oh no, I could never drive a minivan.
Oh, come on. Don't be like that. I have a minivan.
Well, you can rock it, but I have a Kia Soul. It was
Right.
the hamsters. They did it for me. So I actually transferred into my car because I am privileged enough to be able to move about in that way. But just because I'm very bad at navigating like parallel parking, me in a van would probably not be the best fit. Yeah.
It is kind of like driving a bus. I don't really know about that.
Right?
That's too fun. Well, that's awesome, though. I'm glad that you're able to drive. I think so far almost everybody I've talked to drives, so that's really cool because a lot of people don't think we're able to drive ourselves around, but there's so much
Right?
advanced technology out there to be able to drive. So you drive with hand controls, but I actually drive with a joystick, and so it operates just like my power chair, but the whole car works off of one joystick, so it's pretty
Oh
cool.
my God. I kind of want to go wherever you are and drive with you just for fun.
It's kind of like a
Like
spaceship. It's all touch screen and, pretty fancy.
isn't it? How fun.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So now that we've kind of talked about what life looks like and kind of how you go day to day, what do you do to keep your positive attitude all the time? You always seem so positive and just ready to take on the next challenge. What's that look like for you?
I meditate a lot. I
Okay.
pray a lot. See, the funny thing is, people think because I'm LGBTQ, I don't have a spirituality. Like, they don't get that I'm a very spiritual person. So I pray a lot. I try to think of the one thing every morning that I'm grateful for. Because you and I, even though we have disabilities, we have privileges that other people with disabilities do not have.
Right.
And I always try to acknowledge my privilege, even though I haven't been privileged my entire life. I realize now that I am privileged, and so I try to be thankful and really mindful of my privilege and be grateful for the opportunities that I do have, because I realize that not everybody with a disability has those opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make a good point about, each one of us has opportunities and some of us more than others. And sometimes even those can be taken for granted, just like individuals, who can walk and they're like, oh, I just get up and brush my teeth. And I'm like, man, I wish I could get up and just brush my teeth. But
Me too.
people don't think about things like that, And
Exactly.
so each one of us has things that we have to be thankful for because each one of us has abilities that one can do over the other. So really good point there as well. So you obviously are a change agent in your community, writing policies and things like that. So what is one thing that you're looking forward to changing next?
I'm gonna have to bring it back to the media. One of the reasons I'm going back to LA, to be close to the people that I love, but really now I think is the time to reinvigorate my career on the screen and stage. I took a minute and paused and did my moment, and then Special came out, which my friend Ryan was part of. But again, it was a very narrow perspective of
Right.
what somebody's disability experience is. And
Right.
even Special was very narrow in the way it looked at disability. It did open the door, but I'm not about opening the door. I'm about blowing out the wall and throwing in new fixtures and textures and making it look like my experience. So
Right.
that's my goal in 2021, 22,
Okay.
because I want a refund on 2020. I think we should have it back. It shouldn't count, right? Because we're going through this situation. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talk a lot about media. So let's hear what your talents are. What do you do for media?
I'm a stand-up comedian and I'm an actor. Those are my two most well-known talents. I've done a lot of independent films. Some of them are okay, some of them are not so good. So don't ask me what they are because I don't want people to start Googling me. But I do stand-up comedy, which I'm also really good at. And I cannot sing, I cannot paint. I want to learn how to sing. because I'm so close to New York, but yet my agent will send me out for an audition on stage, and the first thing it'll say, please be able to sing. And I'm like, can't do that. I can do happy birthday. Yes, exactly.
Very cool. That's awesome. So any other hobbies or anything like that you like to do?
Okay, so now I'm going to sound super shallow. I love shopping. Amazon and me are like, that's my boyfriend. Because I shop on Amazon weekly. I'd stop the daily because it used to be daily. I paused it, so it's weekly. And I am very into skincare and making sure that people um, look good, because I think with people with disabilities, we need to take care of ourselves as much as the next person. Because if we look good on the outside, guess what? We're going to feel better on the inside.
Exactly.
So that's my hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap up our interview, is there anything maybe I didn't ask about that you'd like to share, or anything, since Wheellifeconnections is kind of on that mission to kind of connect everybody globally and get rid of that gap between those in and out of the disability community, anything, any pieces of advice or anything you'd like to share before we go?
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of change going on in our universe right now, in our world, with COVID and Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ issues. One of the things I always share to people is we all have to work together. Whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's disabled issues, whether it's LGBTQ issues, equality for one group matters more than the other. We all have to be equal in our voices and our challenges, or else none of us are equal. And I really think that's really an important message. The protests that are happening aren't accessible to people with disabilities. They're not safe because we cannot be in crowds of 100 people safely. And so we really need to think about that when we're talking about social justice issues. How can we really be equal if we're um, if we're siloing out other people, right? If we're saying it's equal to our community, but it doesn't have to be that equal to that community,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And for sure, I think there's a lot to learn from 2020. It's been quite an interesting year, and we're only 6 months in.
I've been taking notes. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think something new has happened every month, so it's definitely a different pace for what we're used to kind of living in and day out. But it's really important, I think, that each community, whether you want to, be in this community or that community, that eventually we have to realize we're all one community. And if we don't work together, it's going to be all separate communities, and this is going to be continuous and going to keep happening. So it's just important that, we're all here for each other. And obviously each one of us faces challenges every single day. Just depends on what the challenge is. It might be that I can't brush my hair. It might be something totally different for you. And the person over there, it's something completely different for them, but it still impacts each one of us and how our day turns out, right? So I really appreciate your time, Andy. It was great having you today on Wheellifeconnections. I would love for people to be able to connect and follow your journey as well. So we'll make sure we share some ways to connect with you.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then if you get yourself back into the media industry, feel free to do it again. Let's connect again and see where you are.
When I have my first talk show or my first TV show, I'm going to be like, hey, Sarah, what's going on?
There you go.
I'll broadcast you on my show and be like, how's it going?
There you go. When that happens, you let me know. We'll make sure Wheellifeconnections is all over it.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely, Andy. It was really great meeting you.
You too. Bye.
Bye.